Hey everyone, and welcome to my thrift tips video. I feel like a lot of people always say, oh, I don't know how you find all these great thrift gems. When I go to my thrift store, all I found is grandma clothes and Forever 21 and Hollister shirts. Well, the tips I'm going to give you are going to show you how to thrift anywhere and come up with gems for cheap. Anyone can do these things no matter how packed or empty that you think your thrift store is. And I'll cover the best times and spots to thrift, how to prepare for thrifting, finding awesome stuff that fits you, and how to do it all cost effectively. So let's just get right into my tips. So before you even leave the house, you're gonna wanna bring a thrifting bag because first of all, it's annoying to have to carry around your phone and your keys and your wallet while also trying to juggle all of the thrift hangers. So you're definitely gonna want a bag to keep all your stuff in. And then I like to bring a measuring tape because a lot of thrift stores actually don't have fitting rooms ever since COVID. So it's nice to have a measuring tape and to know your sizes ahead of time. And then it's also definitely nice to bring hand sanitizer because you always feel icky after the thrift store. And I usually keep one in my car, but sometimes if you touch something at the thrift store that's just kind of gross, you want to instantly sanitize your hands. And I also like to bring water and sometimes even a snack because I don't know about you guys, but every time I go thrifting, I get this like weird taste in my mouth and I start getting like the thrift sickness is what I call it. So it's definitely nice to bring a water to feel hydrated and let you keep thrifting longer. I will also bring a reusable bag because many thrift stores don't just give you plastic or paper bags to check out with. You have to buy the paper bags or you have to buy a reusable bag from them. So I'll usually just bring my Savers bag with me because it's pretty big. But if you're going for something smaller and more casual and you're not going to buy as much stuff, then you can also just bring a smaller reusable bag, like a tote bag, to help carry your belongings in, and then eventually put all your stuff in when you check out. Another important thing you do is make sure you're wearing socks because if you want to try on any shoes, you do not want to do that with your bare feet because that's gross. I would also recommend having a list or inspo pictures before you head out to the thrift store because that can kind of help guide what sections you go to and what types of pieces you're looking for. In my recent video, I actually showed how I found all the pieces that I'm going to use for a capsule wardrobe, and that involved making a list of everything that I felt would match my style and then taking that thrift shopping with me and checking off everything that I find. I would definitely do this if you have limited time, but if you have a lot of time to spend, then you can definitely just explore the entire thrift store and find anything that interests you. So next you have to figure out what thrift store you want to actually go to. I prefer going to suburban thrift stores, especially in higher income neighborhoods because higher income equals better and more expensive items. And I feel like they have a good balance of having a lot of good items, but also switching those items out pretty frequently and not having a ton of people packed in the store. Rural thrift stores are usually going to be cheaper, however, they're not going to have new items as often just because there's less people that live there and they're not going to be replacing their items as much and donating more things. So those ones, I'd say if you go like once a month to those places, you'll find new stuff. Thrifting in the city can be a little bit competitive, especially at places like the Goodwill bins. Basically, if you don't know what the Goodwill bins is, they have them in most major cities, and basically the concept is it's all of the old donations from Goodwills that didn't sell, and it's just thrown into these giant blue bins, and you just go in there and you dig through everything and you pay by the pound, and it's only like $1 or $2 a pound, so you get some pretty good steals, but you also have to dig through clothes and it's not really organized at all. But in big cities, people will get their set cart and they'll dig through all the stuff they want, and then they'll just go sit in the corner because every hour or so they restock these places, and as soon as a new bin comes out full of stuff, these people just flock to it, and it's not fun. It's pretty weird in my opinion. I mean, I guess if you like doing that, then good for you, but I just think it's a little strange. So I feel like it can definitely be harder to find stuff there, but you can still find good gems at a reasonable price. And for normal thrift stores in the city, I feel like they're also pretty packed and pretty picked through too, but I do think that you can still find stuff there as long as you're willing to look harder and have a good strategy going into the thrift store. If you aren't sure where to go, I would recommend just looking it up on Google Maps, looking at the reviews, and searching by the little like keywords such as affordability or items there to see if this thrift store usually has good items, what their prices are like, and all that. So every once in a while, the thrift stores will have a big sale day where basically everything in the store might be 50% off or something like that. And although you can get some pretty good steals those days, I actually avoid going to the thrift store that day because when there's a big sale like that, it's going to be packed and all the items are going to be pretty picked through. It's going to be hard to find stuff because everyone else has already beat you to it. And usually when a thrift store has a big sale like that, it kind of indicates that they're only doing it to get rid of a bunch of inventory that they've been sitting on for a long time. So instead, I like to go a day or two after the sale because that's when everything's sold and they're replacing all that stuff with the new stuff, and even if it isn't 50% off, you can still get it for a good deal. And I prefer going on the weekdays just because they're less crowded, and honestly, people that are also my age and my style are going to be looking for the same stuff as me, and I feel like my demographic is going to be going on the weekends, but during the weekdays it tends to be a different demographic of people that are not going to be shopping the same stuff as me, so it's therefore less competitive and I can find more of the stuff that I wear. I would, however, be careful of the hours when going during the weekdays because some of their stores close earlier at like 5 and you don't want to show up there in their clothes. And you definitely can go on the weekends. Like I go on the weekend all the time. It's just a little bit more crowded and picked through in my opinion, and that's when all the Depop girls and the guys with their utility coats are there. But I would be aware that some chains like Salvation Army are closed on Sundays, so just make sure that you check a store's hours and times before you show up. And I would actually recommend going to the thrift store as soon as you possibly can, like as soon as it opens if possible, because the night before they've just restocked everything, no one's had a chance to look at it yet, and you can go see and get new stuff. And that's when I tend to find the best things, is when I go like pretty soon after they open. There also tends to be less people, which means less competition picking through things. But if you can't make it when the store opens and you do go later in the day, they do actually restock things pretty often, so you're not out of luck. So the first thing I always do is look at the sign that's posted in most thrift stores that says what color of tag is on sale. For example, at my local Salvation Army, sometimes it'll be a purple tag is 50% off and blue tags are $1. So when I'm looking around, I remember, okay, purple tags and blue tags, and I look for those, and because I know those ones are going to be super cheap. Most thrift stores do a tag discount like this, but if you aren't sure what your thrift stores are for the day, just ask an employee and I'm sure they're happy to help. And the reason they do this tag discount is because every day that they put out new items, they're going to put those items under a different color tag. So let's say one day they decide to tag everything with a red tag, and then all that stuff is going to be priced normally and it's going to sell, and then 2 weeks later whatever's left of that original red tag bunch is not sold yet, so they're going to discount it to be the 50% off or maybe $1 or whatever it may be. So all that stuff that's been sitting there is going to be discounted, and that's just their way of keeping track of how long stuff has been there and making sure that they discount it so it goes away so they can replace it with new stuff. So tag discounts are really important to keep in mind at your thrift store, and not every thrift store does it, but most of them, like Goodwill or Salvation Army, do. And I always get a cart if possible at the thrift store because it makes it easier to hold all my stuff, and it makes it a lot easier to shop when I can put all my stuff inside the cart and not have to worry about hanging it on my fingers, because whenever I try to hold like hangers on my finger, you end up with these like black marks because of the hangers are like gross there. And sometimes if I try to like carry it in my arm, I'm like holding my arm like this but with pounds of clothes sitting on it for like 30 minutes, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of starts hurting, and after you take all those clothes out, my arm is like sore. So I always like to get a cart or a basket if possible because it makes it just a lot easier to shop, and it makes me want to shop a lot longer. Another very important tip is that you want to check every single section. If you're a girl, you want to check the men's section. If you're a guy, you want to check the girls section. Everybody should be checking every single section. You should be checking the kids section, you should be checking the home section, the bag section. Even if it's something that you're not particularly interested in, you should be checking it, because what people do is they'll shop and then they'll look at their stuff, decide what they want and what they don't want. And a lot of times when people put stuff back, they put it out of place of where it's supposed to go. So a lot of times, if you're going through like the women's tank top section, you'll find a big group of like these cool sweatshirts and jeans that somebody picked out but they put back because it didn't fit them, was too expensive for them, or whatever it may be. Somebody already did all the work for you and found all the good stuff and just left it there for you to get. So I mean, I think it's pretty worth it to just check every section. And also, employees will sometimes like hide good things because they want to buy it after they're done working, which is kind of crazy, but it does happen and you can find good stuff doing that. And another reason that you want to check every single section is because even if you think that a thrift store is not going to have that great of women's blazers or purses and bags, I promise you, you can find some gems. I found gems in every single section of the thrift store. You just have to know and be willing to look. My favorite section is definitely the men's section. I get so much of my vintage sweaters, my vintage jeans, t-shirts, sweatshirts in the men's section. And don't be scared off when there's some old guy shopping for jeans right next to you and he's giving you a dirty look. He doesn't matter. You're gonna find some good stuff if you look in the men's section. Their men's clothing tends to be better quality and it tends to be cheaper. If your thrift store has changing rooms, then I would definitely search extra hard in the racks around the changing room, because people tend to put things back that didn't fit them there, and just because it didn't fit them doesn't mean it can't fit you, and it doesn't mean that it isn't a gem. Almost every single time I go to a thrift store, I find a good pair of vintage jeans, because I feel like most people don't know how to look for them, and the key is the men's section. Men's jeans do fit women, and you can find a lot of vintage Levi's, Wranglers, Lee's, Tommy Hilfiger, and other cool vintage styles in the men's section. Personally, my favorite vintage jeans are Levi's, and I'm gonna put a few styles at the bottom that I would look out for that tend to have a higher rise and more of a wide leg. And so when you're looking for vintage jeans, I would definitely look for 100% cotton, because cotton jeans are going to be more durable, they're not going to break down or release microplastics, and they're just going to be a better vintage look and feel. And this is one of the places where your measuring tape is going to come in handy. Even if you can't try a pair of jeans on, you can measure the waist here, you can measure the rise to see if it's going to be high-waisted, or if you're looking for a lower waist, you can see that. You can see the inseam, which, side note, even if the inseam is too long for you, you can always just crop your jeans or roll them up and it looks fine. And then you can also measure the hips and just anything else that you need to measure to make sure that they fit you. Another thing to keep in mind when looking through vintage jeans is that if there's any stains or rips near like the thighs or the knees, you can always just distress your jeans. Like, anyone can just distress their jeans. It's not that hard. Look up a YouTube video on how to do it. It will give them a second life and they'll look cool. Personally, I prefer to wear custom distressed vintage jeans because vintage is just so much better quality, and those fast fashion jeans with rips in them are gonna break down pretty fast and not last you as long. One way I can easily tell if a pair of jeans is going to be good or not is by looking for little vertical lines on them, because some jeans, if you see like the vertical lines all over them, that means that there's going to be a lot of polyester in them and they just don't have as much of a good vintage feel. So I try to avoid jeans that have that. Another tip is to always look in the men's and women's sweater sections. I find a lot of good sweaters in the women's section, but I always make sure to check the men's section because that's how you find a lot of good quarter zips and chunky sweaters and sweater vests. Also, men always have the better t-shirts and sweatshirts. I occasionally do find good stuff in the women's section, but I feel like they tend to put the thinner and non-vintage t-shirts and sweatshirts in the women's section. So whenever I go to the men's section, that's where I find the good 100% cotton t-shirts with cool graphics, and same for the sweatshirts. One underrated section is the suits and pajamas section. Personally, I'm not big on buying underwear and bras from a thrift store. However, in this section, combined with the pajama section, that's where you can find a lot of cool lace camis, which are perfect little tank tops or to layer over stuff. I also like to look through the women's suit section because you can find a lot of good quality stuff there, and especially blazers and even sets that are like pretty cheap. Like, I found a lot of women's suit sets that retail for like hundreds of dollars for like 15 bucks at the thrift store. And even if something doesn't fit you perfectly, you can always get it tailored and it'll be a lot cheaper than if you bought it brand new. Another tip is if you find two high-end pieces kind of close to each other in a thrift store, then I would just go through that entire rack again because odds are that there's gonna be more of them. For example, I went to the thrift store recently and I was on my way out, I was about to leave and I was just like, I'll go see if there's like a cool vintage button up I can find. And I look for like a few of them and then I find a Saint Laurent one. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And I was like, okay, well, that's a pretty good find. I'm just gonna look through a few more before I check out. And then I find like a few down a Gun Sachs shirt. And I'm like, huh? So I basically just went through the entire rack and I found like a total of like 10 cool vintage button-ups. And the reason I did this was because if there's like two similar really nice things like that, odds are it was one person donating a bunch of them, and if you keep looking, you're probably gonna find more. Another example of this is one time I found two like vintage Nike windbreakers, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep looking, and I just started over, went through the entire rack, and I ended up finding a total of like 5 of them, which is crazy. Another tip is that stains are not always a deal breaker. Personally, I feel like stains are not a big deal, like small ones, Like if there's just a small one somewhere on the clothing and it doesn't really stand out or it's not that noticeable, it doesn't really bother me. But if it bothers you, just know that a lot of stains at the thrift store can actually be washed out because they just don't wash their clothes before they put them out. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping. I always make sure I check out the jacket section because you can find a lot of cool stuff there. I think all the jackets I own are actually thrifted, and I love them all so much, and they're so high quality. And when you buy a brand new jacket, to get like a decent quality one, you're paying like $200, and it's probably going to be fast fashion. So why not just go to the thrift store and find one for like 10 to 20 bucks that is the same quality, super unique, and sustainable. I would also always check out the shoe section because I find so much good stuff there. There are so many cool shoes, and I would just check the entire thing, even like the kids section and the men's section, because people will like hold on to stuff and put it out of place, or people will look at the wrong shoe size. Like for example, they'll see it's a UK 7 and they'll put it with a size 7, but it actually fits a size 9. So I'd recommend just looking through the entire shoe section and trying stuff on if you have socks on. Another tip is that the home sections actually have so much good stuff in them for really cheap, and I love to buy home decor at the thrift store. And I'm not going to go super deep into that stuff because this video is more targeted towards clothing, but if that is another video you'd be interested in seeing, then just let me know. So whenever you see employees putting new stuff onto their rack, they'll usually have like their own separate little rack that they're pulling all the stuff on and putting it onto each section. And I feel like most people don't know that you can literally shop stuff on that rack, and that's just their brand new stuff. Nobody's seen it yet, so this is a prime chance to get good stuff. And it's not rude. Like, these employees actually want you to take stuff from there because that just means it's less stuff that they have to put away. Okay, so at this point you've gone through the thrift store, you found all your stuff, and you're ready to just narrow it down to what you're actually going to get and check out. So the first thing I would do is find a rack in like a less busy section where there's not as many people around, make some space, and then just set all your clothing up on it. And then here, I'll basically start at one end of all the clothing, and I'll pull out each piece and I'll decide if I'm keeping it or not. If I'm going to keep it, I'm going to put it in my cart. If I'm not going to keep it, I'm going to just keep it on the rack and slide it over. And then I just go through everything I have and decide if it's worth the price and if I like it. Here's where you can also try some stuff on. Even if you don't have dressing rooms, you could still use your phone as a camera and hold stuff up to you, or if it's like a jacket, you could put it over yourself and try it on, because you definitely want to get an idea of how things are going to look on you before you buy it. Okay, so when you're actually checking out, if you didn't bring a reusable bag, then I would highly recommend just paying the extra 10 cents or whatever and getting their paper bags, because let me tell you, it's really annoying to have to grab your 20 clothes you just bought, keep them all in your arms, and somehow walk all the way to your car and put them in without dropping anything. Like, it's worth the 10 cents to just buy a paper bag and put it in there if they don't have bags for you. Also, if your thrift store has the option to sign up for their rewards program, definitely do it, because I get a lot of coupons and save a lot of money doing this. And a lot of thrift stores like Savers or Goodwill, whenever you donate any amount of items, they'll give you a coupon for 20% off your next purchase, which is such a good deal. It actually knocks off so much money. And when you get home with your items, I would just read the wash tags carefully to make sure that your items stay in good shape. Some other places to consider when thrifting are going to the Goodwill bins if you have one near you, estate sales, garage sales, or antique stores. You can find a lot of good stuff going to these types of places too. Thrift stores are not the only way to get cool secondhand clothing that's affordable. So let me know if you'd want to see a video with tips for these other types of thrifting. I think that could be pretty interesting. Just let me know if that's something you'd want to see. But yeah, for now, that's all the tips. If you have any questions, just feel free to comment below. I would love to help you out. And if you'd like to see some of my thrift finds and how I style them, then check out some of the thrift hauls that are on my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.